In August and September, Base Building for Power and Blue Future piloted an in-person, all-day door-knocking boot camp training in the most important, currently Republican-held flippable congressional districts in the United States, including Pennsylvania 8, Pennsylvania 10, and Pennsylvania 7, as well as Arizona 6 and CA 40. We want to tell you what we learned on the ground, how conversations went with voters, and about all the volunteers we recruited. First, we will have Base Building for Power's founder kick it off to share the details of our program. Then we will hear from folks who knocked on doors with us, directly from the communities we invested in. We will also leave some time for Q&A, and we'll close the program with a survey to hear your thoughts and feedback. We will also invite folks to stay after for optional breakout rooms with our leaders to continue strategizing. So to kick it off, I would like to introduce my friend, colleague, mentor, and lifelong organizer, Harley Agostino. Harley has spent 15 years in the labor movement organizing immigrant and hotel workers with Unite Here. He never underestimates the power of collective action to change our fortunes in the workplace. Harley co-founded Base Building for Power and collaborated with Dolores Huerta and the Dolores Huerta Foundation to teach the craft of organizing to a new generation. And that's how we met. When Harley was building out his program in 2024, I recommended he go to my hometown, Hazleton, Pennsylvania. I knew it was a community that deeply needed his expertise and full of people ready to organize. A few trips to the district and one ruptured appendix later, Harley now has a piece of himself in Hazleton. Harley, I pass it to you to share the success of our door knocking program in Hazleton and beyond.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Morgan. We have a tremendous group of people here. It's so great to be with you in this very important discussion. And thank you, Morgan and Nick and Blue Future, for all the work that you're doing to train the next generation of leaders. It's been tremendous to partner with you on this project and many others. It is true that I lost my appendix in Hazleton 10 days before Election Day while I was training canvassers. I did grow up in San Francisco, so of course I left my heart in San Francisco, but I did leave my appendix in Hazleton. I'm connected to Hazleton because of my $9,000 of medical debt, but that's not the only thing that's tying me there. It's people like Morgan and David and Rena and people that you're going to meet today that have really inspired me to train and organize in one of the most important communities in the nation. I also want to take a moment to thank my mentor, Dolores Huerta, United Farm Worker co-founder, who really inspired me to be a movement leader and see this as my life's work. She's a big reason I'm here today. She trained me and a team of young organizers in the early 2000s in the Central Valley or the Central Coast of California. And she's been a key advisor to our project from day one. The Dolores Huerta Foundation was our fiscal sponsor. She's participated in so many of our trainings. And she's taught us the importance of believing deeply in the people that you're organizing. So she would always say that when you're asking somebody to volunteer, you are giving them an opportunity to improve their life. And so I remember that every time I'm asking somebody to step up. And it's important that we believe in people, and she did it against all odds. She coined the phrase "si se puede" when she was organizing against the powerful growers in the Central Valley. And that "si se puede" spirit is what we need now in this moment right now. So she showed us how to build a base and believe in people. In 2006, I was organizing in a farm worker community, Santa Maria, California. It's 90,000 people, 70% Latino. And within a year of the deep organizing that she showed us, relational organizing, we shocked the grower establishment and elected the first Democrat ever and the first Latina on the city council. We also had 15,000 people marching for immigrant rights in a town of just 90,000 people. This was at a very important point in the immigrant rights movement in 2006. Many of you remember that. But the real heroes of getting Hilda Zacarias elected to city council were the precinct leaders that knocked on doors. And you know what? 90% of those people couldn't even vote, either because of their immigration status or because we had a team of 16 and 17-year-olds who were knocking on doors to get voters to win that historic election. In 2022, I took that same model to Washington 3 to help to elect Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, who's widely seen at that race was widely seen as the most surprising race of the entire midterms. And we did that with one paid staff member. We recruited 500 volunteers and we knocked on 40,000 doors in a red district that 538's Nate Silver said there's only a 2% chance of winning this district. People are angry and upset about what's going on right now. I don't have to tell this group this, but the good news is that when we hit the doors and we ask people to step up, an astounding 87% of people that we had a substantive conversation with at the doors were willing to volunteer. And door knockers of all experience levels consistently recruited 3 volunteers an hour on the doors. I've been organizing a long time. I was shocked at those numbers. So first, a couple of words about the painful 2024 election. And I'm not going to dwell on this, but I have learned more from elections that I lose than elections that I win. And so we know that a lot of demographics swung right. A lot of people sat out the election. And a lot of people flipped to Donald Trump. It was devastating. But I think that there are some very important lessons in how we run field organizing that we need to take out of the 2024 election. And quite frankly, it made me think out of the box and radically change the way that I train door knockers. I think the whole model of electoral field is broken and we need a new one that combines the lessons of Dolores Huerta and modernizes it to the current situation. Field organizing has gotten really messed up by the pandemic, by Citizens United and how there's unlimited amounts of money in our elections, and by social media. But we can turn it around. So I personally knocked on thousands of doors in 2024. I knocked on doors with tons of organizations, over a dozen in 6 swing congressional districts and 5 swing states. I saw what was going on in the field. And then I ended up in Hazleton, a mostly Dominican community that voted 60% for Donald Trump. And we did the best that we could. But we did what we always do: show up to a low propensity voting community, last minute voter contact, out of town organizers from New York, volunteers bust in, and we tried to just make it happen. And meanwhile, the more I talked to people in Hazleton, I realized that the Republicans were doing deep, sophisticated organizing, relationship building, volunteer recruitment for years. They simply out-organized us. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what we are trying to do different than the conventional field model that I saw in 2024. So the conventional model is you target likely voters, and like I just mentioned, you do late turnout and you blitz the low propensity voters. Our model is to organize everybody all of the time. The last election focused heavily on paid canvases and lots of people who were running the canvases that were not from the community. We are focused on local people and on building volunteer capacity in these key districts. Last election, a lot was focused on cold knocks. And we focused on relational organizing because it's so important when there's somebody that knows you to convince you to vote. It's the best way to get somebody to vote. I saw tons of wraps that were policy heavy and had all this information. We're focusing on really building a solid connection, and we're giving people the relational tools to connect with somebody on the issues that they care about. In terms of objectives, we all know this, elections, we do a big election, and then what happens? Everybody disappears, and that's it, right? And what we want to do is we want to invest year round and partner with those community organizations that are there year round. Volunteer recruitment, this drove me crazy. Nobody asked people to volunteer to do more than vote against Donald Trump. And in our model, we ask everybody to volunteer. Lastly, in terms of the training, the focus, what I saw in 2024 was on getting the IDs, finding out what they think. And what we focus on is volunteer recruitment and finding people who could be persuadable. So I want to talk a little bit about our model. We are a training organization, so you're going to hear about our door knocking training. I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit. And we door knock every door. We focus on persuading Trump voters. In addition to getting anybody to volunteer, we're recruiting volunteers. It doesn't matter if you can't vote, if you skip the election, if you're a Trump voter, we want to recruit you to volunteer, to talk to your friends and family, building those relationships on a local level. And then ultimately those relationships plug into local organizations that are organizing year round, like Make the Road and Arizona List that you're going to hear from later. So activating people for the long term, and that's how we think that we're going to build power. Okay, so now I want to tell you about our 5-day training, and we actually did way more than that, but we're going to focus on the 5 districts that we organized a 9-hour training in Pennsylvania 7, Pennsylvania 8, Arizona 6, California 40, and Pennsylvania 10. And so we got people together. It was a mostly working class group, very diverse group. And I spent an hour focusing on getting in the door. Because if you know how to build a relationship with somebody in that first 20 seconds, you can triple your voter contacts. If you just come in with a rap, nobody's going to talk to you, right? So that involved finding some commonality, the sports team, talking to their kid, talking to their dog, trying to make a joke, breaking the ice. And when you can break the ice with somebody, then you can start talking about the issues. So the second thing was we connected with them on the issues. The number one issue before the election and after the election is the cost of living. That should not be a surprise to anybody, but we train people on how to connect with them on the cost of living. What is your experience? What costs are affecting you the most? And then maybe share a story about, here's the costs. I would share a story about my appendix that cost me $9,000 for a tiny little surgery in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. And then that would ignite the other person to tell me about how they were screwed over by the healthcare industry. So finding issues, connecting with them, and then agitating. This is probably the most important thing in organizing that's missing in a lot of the training, is that we need to tap into people's anger, because that's what moves people into action. So once we connect, once we agitate, then it's time for the ask. Will you sign a petition to stop these tariffs? We had a couple sentences about how the tariffs are affecting the cost of living. Most working class people already knew that, right? But we talked to them and then we asked them, will you sign our petition to stop the tariffs? Now at the bottom of the slide, I don't think you can click on it, but we're going to give you the deck where you can actually see the petition to stop the tariffs. The petition was a mixture between a petition, a volunteer ask, and a survey, and you're going to see in a minute. So we get them agitated, then will you sign the petition? We get their information, And then we ask them, will they talk to their friends and family about this petition? And that's asking them to do relational organizing. 87% of the people agreed to do something about the tariffs. Unbelievable amount. We then ask them what else they're willing to do. Are you willing to knock on doors with us? Are you willing to make phone calls with us? What else are you willing to do? We then got their contact information, and then we asked them who they voted for in the last election and how they thought about Trump's support. So we got a lot of information in this one door knock. And what was so amazing about it is that brand new organizers who it was their first time door knocking, this may sound complex to you, but they did just as good or better than people who had a ton of experience, which that really, really surprised me. Okay, another part of so we trained them. It involved me demonstrating, it involved role plays, it involved people practicing together. And then after 2 or 3 hours, we're out on the doors, right? And we are trying to talk to everybody. We don't use minivan. We knock on every door. Why? Because behind every door is a potential volunteer. And if we're going to build a movement, volunteers are the backbone of any successful movement. So we talk to the flippers, the Trump voters. We talk to the skippers, the people who didn't vote last election. They're not going to show up on your minivan. And we talk to non-voters as well. Okay, so once we send people out, we knock on doors, we had everybody share their location so that I could literally go around a neighborhood and knock on a few doors, give some hands-on training with each person. We brought everybody back together. Each place recruited 3 volunteers an hour. And then we did a new training, which is how to talk to Trump voters, how to influence Trump voters. And this was a different training than I've developed before, but it was a lot about communication and about getting yourself. The first part about talking to anybody you disagree with is to breathe and to prepare yourself for a hard conversation. Get yourself into a curious mindset. Then you want to find a point of agreement, usually the cost of living. You want to avoid being pulled down rabbit holes. And then if you can connect on the cost of living, the same thing as the other voters, agitate, push to action. And then the last thing that's really important, I should say it's really the first thing, if you're talking to a Trump supporter, is that you have to determine whether that person is movable or they're a waste of time. And I would say maybe 25% of the Trump voters that I met were MAGA Republican. I could tell right away. It's important that we value our time. We move on from those people. We don't get sucked into a debate, and we identify who is movable and who is a waste of time. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you some of the data from what we heard on the doors. And I think a lot of this is pretty fascinating. So the first was who we talked to. And so we talked to 17% Trump voters, 29% Harris voters, 28% I don't vote. So it's about almost a quarter. So we're talking to a lot of people from different kinds of people, different kinds of conversations. Of everybody that we talked to about the tariffs and the cost of living, 89% of people were willing to volunteer. And the main thing that we pushed them to do was to talk to their friends and family. Now, why did we ask them to do that? Because in this time where there's less trust of political parties, there's less trust of any institution, there's more social media hitting everybody, there's ads, there's confusion. Having somebody that knows you, to talk to you about the issues that you care about is more important than ever. But 89% saying that they're willing to volunteer was a big surprise to me. And it just tells me that the ground is fertile to organize and ask and get a lot of people involved. So then I was curious about, okay, well, how did it line up in terms of people who voted for Harris, people who voted for Trump? So that's what this slide is. So the Harris voters, 97% were willing to volunteer, but the Trump voters, 81% were willing to volunteer. The people who skipped the election, a lot of people talk about them being apathetic. These folks were not apathetic. They were pissed off about the cost of living. And what is that? 88% of people who didn't vote in the election were willing to volunteer. And then the non-voters about the same. So what were volunteers willing to do? At the next slide. So we asked them to talk to their friends and family. That's what we led with. We also asked them to make a goal of how many people we talk to them. Sorry, how many people they will talk to, 5, 10, 20. So we got their information. They signed the petition. They said that they would volunteer. They gave us a goal. They answered the survey. So these were substantive conversations. So in addition to talking to your friends and family, what else are you willing to do? And this also surprised me that 25% of people were willing to knock on doors with us. All right. So you might be asking, you recruit all these volunteers, then what's next? Right? Because it's one thing to recruit people and they say yes. It's another thing to organize them into the action. So that's where we are right now. And a big part of our organizing and our model is partnering with the local organizations to support these volunteers. So I'll just give you an example with Make the Road recently. So remember, I was in Hazleton at the end of the election. We did a paid canvas. We got a bunch of new canvassers that built a lot of leadership. And then 1 month after the election, there were raids in Hazleton. And because we had organized all these people and because we're not the Democratic Party, we said, all right, so what are we going to do to fight back the raids? How are we going to give people the information? So Urena, who you're going to hear about, you're going to hear from, she organized about 80 people to a meeting to talk about how to fight back. Then she started organizing people to go to the school board to make sure the Dominican parents and community were represented in decisions. Then there was a local election and we got the first Dominican candidate ever elected to a study commission. And now there's going to be another election in a few weeks that you'll hear about. We then connected with Make the Road. Make the Road partnered with us on this project in Hazleton and Allentown. And we're talking with Make the Road about how do we support their capacity, the good volunteers that we find, we plug them into Make the Road, and then we support them as much as possible. None of this could be possible without full-time organizations on the ground. But what we're doing is very different than what outsiders often do, which is like postcarding or making phone calls. We are doing capacity building, volunteer recruitment. All right, so just a couple last things on what we heard. So we asked some questions of just what are people thinking about Trump? What grade would you give Trump right now? And so what we found is Trump in these key districts, swing districts that are held by Republicans, he is extremely unpopular. And not just by Harris voters. Look at the skippers. The skippers, the people who didn't vote the last election, 86% gave him a C, D, or F. Trump voters themselves, people who voted for Trump, are giving 62% are giving him a C, D, or F. These are big numbers. And so our conclusions are that the current way of organizing has not been working. But the good thing is that the field is ripe for recruitment. People are hungry to volunteer. People are hungry to be trained. I was surprised how excited the young people in our trainings were to learn to talk to Trump voters. I expected a lot more resistance. We also have local partners that are ready to absorb these volunteers, and the cost of living and the tariffs, that is the issue. Anybody that wants to organize in these communities, I would talk about tariffs, and all we got to do is ask, and then we're going to talk about our next steps. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Morgan.
Thanks so much, Harley, for giving us this deep dive in the data, and we're excited to continue diving in further with you. But now we would like for you to hear from some of our folks who were on the ground doing this door knocking day in and day out, and who are organizing today in these communities. First up, we are going to pass it to Rena, who joins us from Hazleton, Pennsylvania, a community leader and organizer. Rena, I'll pass it to you, and we could take the slides down.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rina Guerrero. I'm from Hazleton. First, I want you guys to know I really love what we're doing and enjoy it. And I'm so thankful I have opportunity to meet Harley last year, because what we're doing is something I was fighting for a long time. So, like Harley explained to you guys, I was working long time with my community. I was doing like different volunteer work. So when I find Harley, somebody have the same view I have, because that's the same dream. I just want to help like my community. I want my community growing and have more knowledge, and I want to encourage my community to fight. Because usually when you talk to regular basic person every day, they just tell you how they feel, and most of the time they feel frustrated because they feeling is nobody here to fighting for us. That's nobody with the same interest. So right now, when I not right now, when I meet Harley and explain Harley how my community feel, then he teach me. I really appreciated how we was learn, because it's something I was doing in my own before, but I really appreciate it. Every time base building have a training, I wanna try to participate. I was participate because I wanna learn more about how we can learn. I was working with Harley last year, and through Harley, I met Luz, and thank God now I was working with Luz. And like I say, I really enjoy it. I go day by day, knock doors, talk to people. I talk to several families, even those I have opportunity to talk to teenagers, young people, 18, 17, people in teenagers, right? And they are really interesting in learn more, in fighting for our right. And also, like he mentioned before, we don't have like any Hispanic representative in our school district. And now I encourage family. Every time we have a meeting, I try to encourage family to go to the meeting, because I want everybody to learn. We need to know what's going on in our community growing enough. We are a big community now in Hazleton, and most of the people is working, um, you know, pay taxes and everything. So that's basically what I'm doing. And I love what I'm doing. I go day by day every time I have opportunity, not just when I have to knock the door. When I meet everyone, or when I find any family, and try to talk to them about that. And I'm glad every time I find someone, I take a time to listen what they say, what happened, how they feeling. And that break my heart, how working families work, like, feel so frustrated. They feel they don't have nobody to fight for them. That's the reason why today we are here, and I want to continue learn and working with the organization.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rena, for sharing your story. And we're so excited to be working with you and with Make the
Thank you.
Road, which is who I would like to introduce next. We also have Luz joining us from one of our closest partners, Make the Road. So, Luz, I will pass it to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here, for having me here. And it's such a pleasure to see Rena and Harley and all of you. I am the field coordinator with Make the Road Pennsylvania in Hazleton. We have been there for about 2 years now, steady. Before that, we were in and out of Hazleton, but now we are trying to build connections, make connections in the community. And it was so great to get to meet Harley. And then through him, we got the good fortune of meeting Rena, who knows everyone in Hazleton, and it has been fantastic. When we started there, it was really difficult because we had to train our canvassers, the people that we were hiring from the community, like, as you say, from scratch. And now we have a fantastic group, and we are so appreciative of all the help that we have received, because like at the moment we were able to hire Rena, and she's working with us in Congressional District 8, and she has already been trained by Base Building for Power, and she knows a lot. And from this training that happened late summer, we were able to hire 3 more people for our Guardian Captain program, and they are doing fantastic work knocking on doors around their neighborhood. And they have been trained with Base Building for Power. So thank you guys so much. This partnership has been super helpful. We hope it will continue. And I'm looking forward to agitating and causing some good trouble and getting people involved. So thank you. And I will pass it to Morgan.
Absolutely. Yes. It's all about that good trouble. Thank you, Luz, for sharing your story and how we've been able to work together. And it was great to have. I hope you've been able to see a little bit of our model and how it's been put in action. And so we want to thank our partners, organizers, funders, and volunteers for all being with us here with us today. I want to open it up to questions. So to ask a question, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom and we can call on you. We did already get a question in the chat. And so I just want to read that out loud. And Harley, I believe, was going to answer that. So can you clarify with the folks who say who said they will do friends and family work, have you done follow-up? Do they report back on if they have done any of it, and any info on how many of those 80 to 90% of folks stay involved beyond the first ask? Great question.
That is a fantastic question, and thank you so much, Regina, for asking it. We are now at the stage of starting to follow up with those folks and working with Make the Road to do that. So we don't have the data yet on that, but I can tell you that from the 2024 election, where we ran a very similar program, we did follow up with all kinds of folks. And through that, I would say about 50% followed through. But then out of that, we also got other people in the tree, right? So we would find some gems, and then they would get their brother, and then that person would get somebody. So I think the data is really, really important. We want to win. We don't want to just say that we have people that are recruiting that want to be volunteers. We want to see what they actually do. But in my past experience, this first step, getting such a high pool of people to organize, is very encouraging, and I'm confident that we're going to get a lot of those folks. But stay tuned, because the next step is recruiting those folks, connecting them with Make the Road, and seeing what they actually do.
Yeah, absolutely. I see another hand from Bob. Go ahead, Robert.
This is all very intriguing, very encouraging. Great to see you, Morgan, and you, Harley. What role, if any, do folks from outside Pennsylvania, outside the demographic like me, what role, if any, can we play in these efforts?
Thank you, Bob. That's a really good question. I think about that a lot because there's so much energy from people like you in blue states that understand that your efforts are way better in Pennsylvania than they are in Massachusetts, for example. And so I think what the best thing that we can do is whatever supports the volunteer and organizational capacity of the people who live in those districts. So I think that's more important than postcards. I think that's more important than phone calls. I think that's more important than getting on a bus to get there is how do we support, how do we recruit volunteers in those districts, and how do we support those volunteers and those organizations?
So would that support be fundraising then, primarily, or?
It could be fundraising. It could be what I'm doing. I don't live in Hazleton. I now have a relationship with Rena. I now am thinking about Rena's leadership and wanting to support her as much as possible. So you could adopt a few volunteers in, I don't know, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and you're their buddy and you talk to them when things are difficult because it's not all, rainbow and sunshine, right? The volunteers are going to have their setbacks. And if they had a coach or they had somebody who was like, you can do it and you should do it, and here's what I would try, somebody who has some experience organizing, I think that kind of thing would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. And I'm seeing some other great questions in the chat. So we have one from Randy. Has anyone brought up the lack of funding for voter outreach, door knocking to reach young voters? And this is something that's particularly important to us here at Blue Future. And so I wanted to call on my co-director, Nick, to answer that.
Yeah, hey everyone. Thank you all so much for being here, and especially to our local partners, Arizona and Pennsylvania, for taking time to share what we've learned. But yeah, I'm Nick. I'm one of the co-presidents of Blue Future. Randy, thank you for your question. Great to see you. This has been the alarm that Blue Future has been sounding for 8 years, that there is no strategic investment at a broad scale, especially from the Democratic Party and especially for partisan purposes, to actually get young people to vote for the candidates that we need them to vote for in order to pass policies that impact people's lives. $0, zero, leave the Democratic Party infrastructure to support youth voter engagement. I wish I was lying to you. We know there's a huge side of independent expenditure work that funds great youth local organizing all around the country. We are part of that movement. And that's exactly why we did this. Our goal in 2025 was to increase the rigor of our organizing work to reach young voters where they are and on the doors and in their communities on campuses. And this program has been one of the ways that we've been trying to do that, to really be able to have a model that we can bring into 2026. But it's a huge problem that there's such little money that flows, especially on our side compared to the right, to support youth voter engagement. And it's a problem we're all responsible and accountable to fixing. And we thank you all for being here to try to do something about that.
And if I could just add something, Blue Future and us working together on this, we don't wait for money. We will do things on a shoestring if we have to. And we know recruiting volunteers is way more cost effective than having paid canvases. But we know that we could scale up. We're not waiting for the money, but we can scale up the organizing that we're doing 10, 20 fold if the kinds of investments that Nick is talking about come through.
Absolutely. And as I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, so we just have a few more things that we'd like to share with you, and happy to take some more questions at the end as well. But we're really excited to kind of share what this all means for us and kind of to bring it back. And the goal of all of this is to shift political dynamics and build power, to win elections, to change policies, and to change the politics of a place, ultimately winning these improvements in people's lives. And so we're already seeing this happen in my hometown of Hazleton. My high school classmate and current public school teacher, David Dominguez, is running to be the first ever Latino on city council in a community that is 70% Latino. He's rallying volunteers and finding unlikely voters everywhere. Even my dad, a 3-time Trump voter, will be voting for David this fall. So I want to pass it to David to share what this program has meant to him and how it inspired him to run for office. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Luz. Thank you, Rena. These are my top advisors, and I want to thank all for attending this meeting, taking time out of your days. This is a very important mission that we're working on. So I'm 28 years old. I'm a substitute slash long-term teacher here. Now my 4th year. I've been involved in the Democratic canvassing process since the Hillary election. So I have quite some time. And I just want to talk about base building and Blue Future specifically because at first, every single election that we have here in Hazleton, general election, we get lots of outside organizations and outside support to come in and basically help uh, people recruit our people recruit votes for said candidates. And the same thing always happened. They left. We never heard from them. There was no support. Harley and Morgan helped change that with respect to helping train and engage youth voters, train and engage community leaders, such as myself. I'm also the Democratic chairperson of the Hazleton District 1 Dems. And within the past 9 months, their training has been instrumental in increasing civic engagement. It's been instrumental in informing people that they have a voice. Hazleton is a city that has minimum 70% Hispanic population. I've been living here since '05. There was legislation that literally mirrors what's happening right now. Back in 2005, they made it illegal to speak Spanish and to conduct business in Spanish and to rent to people who are of Hispanic descent or people who speak Spanish. My dad was a landlord. He legitimately feared renting to Hispanics, him being Dominican himself, as I am as well. So it's been quite the transition and quite the change, just demographically here in Hazleton. And I feel like Hazleton has a bright future ahead of itself. We just need to engage people. People need to know that their voice has power. People want to be listened to. People want solutions. It's just a matter of fact of finding them and reaching out to them. That's all I have for now.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate you sharing your journey and experience. And, as David mentioned, we've been working with him. A lot of that looks like one-on-one mentorship, helping him set up phone banks, different things like that to make sure we're continuously supporting the leaders that we've been training and engaging with throughout our time. And so David's election coming up on November 4th is our immediate future, but we have ideas of how we can scale this program and continue it. So to continue our conversation, I want to welcome community leader, advocate, funder, and strategist Susan Scher to share more about how base building for power and Blue Future are effectively organizing year round. Susan, the floor is yours.
Well, hello to everybody. I was going to say good morning, but who knows where you are. I hope you're hearing me, right? Okay.
Yes.
So I am now a donor advisor, and I work with a woman who is philanthropic, but doesn't have the time or energy to do the research necessary to give to people and to give to organizations. So I was introduced to Harley 2 years ago. And one of the reasons that my friend Michael and Sarah introduced me to him was that he knew that my donor liked to give to groups that were starting something and they didn't have a track record for other people to give to them. And one of the things at the time, having been a political person my whole life, I knew that going door to door in the old days was just putting something on somebody's doorbell or their wherever they could. They tried to put it in mailboxes. They tried to get in anywhere they could just to put down a piece of paper. That wasn't working. We didn't learn from our mistakes until just recently. And a lot of it is because of Harley and all the groups and the people you've heard from today. It has to be personal, very personal, and to understand what people are feeling and to help them know more. So you kept hearing the word scalable from different presenters today, and also personal. That is so important. So when you talk about fundraising, you talk about giving, all of those who you are doing the work, understand what it costs to do your business. Sometimes it's just getting pizza for the volunteers or a ride because they don't have gas money. Sometimes it's all the administrative work that has to go into this, as you have heard today. Everybody has administrative costs, regardless. It's not, volunteers are not costly. They're not, we may get volunteers to do the work, but there's a lot of other work that goes along with it. So right now, when we talk about scalable, that means that Harley has hell-bent on doing really tough, deep work in some very specific areas, but he could probably do all of them if they had the money. So he might say it only costs $25 per volunteer, but we all know that that's not true. We know that it's like $250 at least, maybe even $2,500 per person. And then you scale that to how many congressional districts we might have to win. So even today, if the Supreme Court changes anything, and look it up, we could be losing so many seats in the near future that we have to get. We have to get that. And you know that. Everybody in the chat is saying how important this is to do this. If you're a funder, fund this. If you are not a funder, but you know people with some money, tell them where the money could go. Thank you. And thank you all who reported today. It's very exciting, really exciting. We can do this.
Absolutely, we can. Thank you, Susan. And I'll just share, I was in Hazleton this summer knocking doors as part of our program, and it was such an incredible experience. And so thank you all for coming today and listening. This was a joint presentation by Blue Future and Base Building for Power, and we're excited to continue working together and stay in touch with our work and our mission.